Welcome back, PetaPixel viewers. It is Chris Nichols here, and look at this. I have a brand new Panasonic GH7, the continuation of by far one of the most popular mirrorless video camera systems of all time. Okay, so this GH7, it is a pre-production camera as far as firmware goes, but the hardware's final, so we're gonna test it fully. In fact, we already have been. We've had this for quite a few days, and Jordan has shot already one episode on the GH7 completely, and of course, we're shooting today's episode on GH7s as well. But what I really wanna talk about is, as a photographer, what does the GH7 bring to the table? It effectively copies the G9 II's photographer performance almost exactly. I mean, it's basically the same across the board. This is a good thing because the G9 II featured a brand new sensor that had better dynamic range than what we saw in the Panasonic GH6. That had a funny way that they were dealing with the sensor, and it actually had poor dynamic range when it came to photos. So I'm happy to see the GH7 is using the G9 II sensor, but otherwise, autofocus performance, IBIS, burst rates, image quality are all basically identical. So now that the GH7 is out, the G9 II makes far more sense as Panasonic's photo-based camera, although it does do beautiful video. And then you've got the GH7, which is definitely more of the video camera, although it does take beautiful photos. If you don't need those advanced video features this brings to the table, the G9 II now makes a lot more compelling sense for a dedicated photographer. Okay, so we got the same photo capabilities as a Panasonic G9 II. We have the exact same body as the older Panasonic GH6. And that's good. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for video. Nice big grip, very comfortable. We do have the same back panel design where this not only fully articulates but tilts out. That gets it away from the mic jack and all the ports. That's really nice to have. Same 3.69 million dot EVF. That's too bad. I feel at this price point that could be a little bit higher. We should be pushing over 5 million dots now, but it's still a very usable viewfinder. And this is a heavier camera. I mean, we're pushing over 800 grams. So this is a little bit bulkier and heavier than, say, a G9 II. Memory card, it is a CF Express Type B, just like we had in the GH6. That is nice, and for photos, although it doesn't change our burst rates, I would expect it's gonna make our buffer clear a little bit faster. But again, the G9 II clears pretty fast with SD cards. I mean, this is really designed for video really, honestly, Jordan, this is really designed for video. You should be talking, actually.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, here, you take the camera.
All right, it's Jordan here, and I'm in front of the camera because the big reason that this is bigger and heavier than the previous G9 II is because of all of those video features. So let's take a closer look, see what makes this body different and better if you're shooting video. So this is quite a wide body, and the reason for that is not just that awesome screen articulation that I love so much, but also that's where you're finding the fan that gives this camera unlimited recording in any of its modes, and there's some very impressive ones we're going to talk about a little bit later. But right on the body itself, we've got other features like 2 record buttons, one on the front, one on the top, and you can actually use your shutter as a 3rd record button if you want. Also, if you look at the bottom, we've got our little front face pin here to keep the camera from spinning on tripod, and these are things we're used to seeing on camcorders, and we're getting them on the GH7. All right, time for a little history lesson about using a micro four thirds camera for video recording, because when the GH6 came out, it brought a huge number of fantastic features to this platform, but there were some real limitations. Chris already talked about the dynamic range issue at base ISO. That affected video as well, and we were still with contrast detect autofocus, which disappointed a lot of people, which is why it was so surprising just a few months later when suddenly the S5 II is announced, and it's Panasonic's first phase detect autofocus. And we all thought, why didn't they just wait and release the GH6 after this was already available? So then for micro four thirds shooters, Panasonic brought out the G9 II, and this gave us that phase detect autofocus in micro four thirds, nice small light body, but it put me in a bit of a bind. Did I want the autofocus that the G9 II offered, or did I want the more advanced record modes that were found in the GH6? Well, my decision was, when I'm going out in the field, I'm gonna bring the G9 II. I really find that autofocus useful, and then the GH6 just got stuck at home, just relegated to shooting B-roll and other even more degrading things. So now we have the Panasonic GH7, and if you're willing to pay the premium, now we've got the option of their highest level micro four thirds body with absolutely no compromises, no more choosing. For example, the combination of having the fan and the CF Express card slot brings back the option we saw in the GH6 to record ProRes right to memory card, but even more impressively, this camera can shoot ProRes Raw internally. I think like Nikon and Red were just distracted and Panasonic got away with it. But this is a huge advantage. Now, if you're shooting in RAW video, you're not going to get a hugely wider dynamic range than you do with standard ProRes. The advantage is it's going to give you a lot more flexibility for adjusting the white balance and doing noise reduction. So for experienced graders, this is a huge coup. Now you can record ProRes Raw using the full width of the sensor in its 5.7K 17:9 aspect ratio recording. You can also do ProRes Raw in 4K, but it's a huge 1:1 pixel crop. The other really nice addition that we're seeing here is the ability to record 1080 at 240 frames per second, but while recording audio. This could be great if you're doing like action sports or something. You still want the sound effects, but the ability to slow it down a lot in post. Here's why 240 frames per second with sound is fantastic, is I can talk to you and then something just magical could happen. As well, just like the GH6, if you want to record external ProRes Raw, you can do that out of the full-size HDMI port on this camera. But alternatively, any of the internal record modes will also be offered going externally to an SSD, and that's going to be a whole lot cheaper than buying a bunch of CF Express cards. Now we're using the same BLK22 battery that we've seen before, and battery life is rated identically to the GH6. But one thing to really keep in mind with these cameras, they have a huge variety of record modes, and also when it's hotter, the fan is going to be working harder. So battery life is really difficult to predict on these, and I do find it's on the lower end of the scale, usually around an hour per battery. Now for me, the biggest brand new feature that we're seeing in the GH7 actually requires a separate accessory to even take advantage of. They've brought out a new XLR2 XLR adapter. We were huge fans of the XLR1 with its compact design, and this is very similar. The big difference is they've added a 3.5mm jack with audio controls for it, so you can get 4-channel audio and very quickly dial in your settings. As well, it's now got a detachable shotgun holder, so if you want to use a directional microphone on it, you don't have to fill up your cold shoe. Also, if you attach the XLR2 audio adapter, it's going to unlock something I've been asking camera companies for years, which is 32-bit float audio. Now, a good way to look at this if you're coming from more of a photo video background is it's recording way more information, similar to like a RAW file in photography. And what that means is it's getting more information if the audio levels are very high and would usually clip, or very low, and when you brought those up, you'd get a lot of noise in it. This is giving you the ability to just record your audio, not worry about levels, and set it afterwards, making sure that nothing is going to clip. Now you can still potentially blow like the pickup on the microphone, but those are very rare cases. For the most part, it just makes audio recording super simple, and you can do everything in post. So one other feature that's new to Micro Four Thirds cameras, but it will be coming to the G9 II as well in the future, and that is the latest implementation of Panasonic's real-time LUTs. Now we've had these before on cameras. Essentially it lets you bake a LUT onto your footage so you don't have to process it afterwards. Just be aware, if you do this, you are throwing away your dynamic range and flexibility in post. But at the same time, they launched the Lumix Lab app, and this is actually really cool. You can jump on the app, download a whole bunch of different creator LUTs, experiment with the look, or you can upload your own and share them. So this means there's going to be a huge number of free LUTs that you can just drop right onto this. But the nice thing is you can also just use them as viewing LUTs. So you're looking at a pretty image, and then you're recording full vlog. Once you get into post, slap it on in your editing system, and you're going to get the look you want and all the dynamic range the camera can capture. Really the only thing this is missing compared to the S9 is that had a specific LUT button, but you can customize any of your many custom buttons to give you that exact same functionality. I really do think this is a feature that's going to be more for the entry-level cameras, but if you want to play with it, it's here. So having shot an episode with the GH7, I wanted to quickly talk about some of my impressions using it in the field. And first of all, I just want to say thank you, Panasonic. They got rid of that back dial on the S5 II and G9 II that is just constantly moving. I find I'm constantly flipping my shutter angle while I'm using it. That's not the case with this. I haven't accidentally bumped my shutter dial once. I also really like that we have a tally lamp on here, so both Chris and I can confirm that we're recording. I mean, those double taps do happen where you think you're recording and you're not. It's nice to just get that visual confirmation. The other thing I was curious about was the autofocus, and having used the G9 II a lot, I'm just not really finding much of a difference with it. If you've got a single subject in the frame, it does a really nice job. Tracking is quite efficient. The only time it really struggles is if you've got a whole bunch of similar looking objects, like sports would be a great example. There you might find it fluttering between subjects, and it takes a lot of hand holding. IBIS performance is also the same as what I saw in the G9 II, which means it really is best in class. Right now we've got the boost mode turned on, which basically makes it look like the camera is on a tripod, even though it's on a monopod that's swaying with the wind while Chris holds a reflector. It's extremely impressive, but you want to turn this off absolutely if you're planning to move the camera. There you can use the standard OIS, which is quite nice, doesn't fight you at all, or you've also got the new high digital stabilization mode that we first saw on the G9 II. The electronic stabilizer mode high gives you basically gimbal looking footage, but you do have to remember it incurs a significant crop, so you're not only losing field of view, but degrading your image quality as well. But if you want really smooth video, it might be worth the trade-offs. So I can just hear myself rattling off all the reasons why this is kind of a perfect camera for the work that I like to do, but you can't avoid the fact that this thing is bulky and it is quite expensive. And a lot of people are going to say, why wouldn't you just grab an S5 II, an S5 IIX? You're getting so many of the features there and a full frame sensor. And remember, that full frame sensor is going to get us better low light performance and better dynamic range, even though the GH7 is no slouch in those areas. But the thing to remember is nothing in the full frame series is giving you features like 4K 120 oversampled video, that 32-bit float point audio, internal RAW recording. This has a lot of features that definitely recommend it. And let's not forget, the rolling shutter is very well controlled. And for a lot of people, that's going to justify using the smaller sensor. But the reason I'm most excited about this camera, if you are an L-mount shooter, is I do think this is a real preview of what we're going to see in the upcoming, what I hope is called an S2H, but maybe they'll call it an S1H Mark II, which would be silly. But I bet we're going to see things like the float point audio, we're going to see the ProRes Raw recording. That's going to be a very compelling camera for L-mount shooters. So whether you're in Micro Four Thirds or L-mount, it's an exciting time to be shooting video on Panasonic cameras. So I've only had a very limited time with the GH7, but already I'm really enjoying it and plan to use it on all kinds of upcoming PetaPixel episodes. So stay tuned for those to get a better idea of how this performs in a variety of situations. And we're certainly going to loop back and give a long-term review on this camera. But thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments, am I crazy about recommending this over a full frame camera? I'm sure you have very strong opinions about that. Make sure you check out the PetaPixel podcast. You can watch it right here on YouTube every week, or you can listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps. Just search for the PetaPixel podcast. We're definitely going to be talking about this camera on the pod in the future. Thanks so much for joining Chris and I, and we will see you soon with more episodes on PetaPixel.